Have you ever heard the word holistic or holistic health and thought, what does that even mean? Well, I have, and it's still a pretty good question that I get asked myself because I consider myself a holistic healthcare practitioner. Now, in order to understand what it means, you have to understand there's essentially two philosophies of health, and one's not better than the other. They're both important and they're both true in their core philosophies and therefore useful. One being holistic healthcare and the other one being allopathic healthcare. Now, at its root, allopathic healthcare, that philosophy is centered around this idea that symptoms are stressful on the body. And when the body is overly burdened with a symptom, it can't self-regulate, or you could say it can't heal as effectively. So if you can alleviate the symptom, then the body can express health more easily, right? So this would be something as simple as someone has a headache, that headache's stressful, it's disruptive to their life, maybe it's not letting them sleep. You can have aspirin or take something that would minimize the headache and therefore allow someone to rest better, sleep better, and be less of a burden on the body. So that's allopathic in a nutshell. Very useful. Holistic healthcare is the complicated one. So holistic healthcare really is looking at the person as a whole, right? So holistic healthcare is nothing new. It's thousands of years old. The name holism, I think that's fairly new. That's probably 100 years old. This idea being that in allopathic healthcare, you're looking at a person as their individual parts. So this would fall under the scientific branch of materialism, or you could say reductionism, like anything in nature can be reduced to its smallest parts and therefore understood. Holism is looking at someone through the philosophy of that individual is greater than the sum of their parts. So you wouldn't look at it as a headache's the problem. You would look at it as there's conditions in that person's life such that a headache is happening, or such that a headache is the result. And so we look at the conditions to be like, why are you getting headaches? And then what can we do to where they're no longer necessary? So that's a bit of a low level, surface level understanding of the difference. Now, holism, like why is it called holistic healthcare? I actually like that. So the root word for health in English comes from an old Anglo-Saxon word, hol, which is the same root, if you trace back language, it's the same root as health, also whole, also holy, as in like saintly, and also integrity. And that kind of all makes sense. Like deep below the surface, they'll have a similar meaning, like someone who's holy or saintly would be integrated, meaning their different parts, their body, their mind, their heart, their spirit would have alignment. And that's integration, and that's wholeness, and that down the road became health, which I think is pretty cool. So one way maybe you can look at this, and feel free to disagree in the comments because I am open to learning, is allopathic is really putting the concern on the symptom, what's going wrong. Holistic is really putting the concern on health. So in holistic healthcare, what you're trying to do is optimize the system such that health can express itself. And allopathic healthcare is really looking at what is the problem, especially in like the mechanistic level, like what thing isn't performing the way it's supposed to, and then how can we intervene to make that thing perform better. That's kind of it in a nutshell. So the holistic practitioner, like myself, is really looking at the person. What is happening in life such that health is not fully expressing itself? And so you can look at different burdens in someone's life, and there's really three ways the body becomes exhausted. And when the body's exhausted, that's when there's breakdown, that's when there's symptoms. So the three categories really are being like physical stress, biochemical stress, and mental emotional. And so physical stress can be anything from just like wear and tear on your joints to sitting in a desk 8 hours a day for 40 years to a car accident to sports injuries, whatever. Biochemical stress can be things like toxins in your environment, viruses, bacteria, poor nutrition. And mental emotional stress can be, well, you should know. If you're watching this, you've lived a little bit and you know mental emotional stress. The dangerous thing with mental emotional stress is it can stack over time. Whereas physical stress, you're typically dealing with the stress that's happening now. Now, there's a domino effect. So past physical stress could have led to poor adaptation, which means poor movement patterns, which means you're not holding yourself appropriately or not carrying yourself appropriately through space, which would increase the stress of movement, right? Because walking is technically stressful. Usually it's not too stressful. People can do it. But if you have poor movement patterns because of an old hip injury and now you're walking with a bit of a limp, that makes walking a little bit more stressful. And that stress over time can exceed your ability to deal with it. And that's when you have breakdown or injury or complaints. So physical stress typically happening now, biochemical stress typically now, even though like maybe my biochemical stress was like that pizza and ice cream I had last night, it's still like fairly present what you're dealing with. But mental emotional stress can stack up over your entire lifespan. Your subconscious mind could still be trying to resolve unresolved issues from, well, birth onwards. And then in holistic principles, like that could be inherited through epigenetics. So like unresolved trauma from parents or grandparents can still be something that you're trying to resolve or deal with or cope with to some capacity as you're trying to navigate your life in the present. And so what happens is an excess of stress, so too much stress, again, stress isn't bad, but if it's excessive or if it exceeds your ability or your capacity to deal with it, that's when you have breakdown. That's when your body, your own intelligence of the system has to decide, all right, well, we can't deal with everything, so let's pick and choose. And then when you're picking and choosing, that means you're not adapting to every stress in your life, and that's when systems start to break down, whether it's bones, joints, muscles, organs, glands, relationships, careers, whatever it is. And so that's my brief introduction to holistic healthcare, and maybe that was clarity for you. Maybe that raised more questions. So if you have more questions, leave some comments in this video and I'll make more videos on that in the future. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Bye.